Hello, so today I thought we'd do a masterboard. This is a masterboard. It's just a small one. You can do them as big as you want, and you can do whatever colours you want and whatever patterns you want. I have a bit of a thing about circles, so a lot of the things on here are circles, but you can just experiment and try whatever you want. So to start with, we need acrylic paints. We need gesso, lots of baby wipes, some mark making materials such as this is the middle out of a till roll, this is the middle out of a roll of ribbon, pen top. Also I've got this which I find very good. It's packaging. And it is actually, it comes like this, and what you do is you peel back just the top layer and it reveals this honeycomb shape. So once you've taken the top layer off, that's what you're left with. That's very good. This is a homemade foam stamp. I've used again some of this honeycomb packaging as a base because it's nice and bulky to get hold of and it gives you a good base. I've then used some of this, it's actually funky foam, and it cuts very easily with a pair of scissors. So if you wanted to do squares, you can cut squares and then just glue it on with PVA all over your packaging. I did circles, so as you can see I've just cut little circles of the foam and then just glued them to the packaging, and then I can use it as a stamp. The funky foam is usually in sheets. I had these little circles left over from when I did some shaker cards, so I didn't want to waste them, so I've used some of those. You can also use as a stamp bubble wrap. You've got to be very careful. I put this onto a piece of packaging so I could use it as a stamp. It isn't as successful as I wanted it to be because some of the bubbles have burst. So what I decided to do instead was use, find a bubble that hasn't burst, individual bubbles just pressed onto an ink pad and then pressed in. So anyway, without further ado, we'll get going. So this masterboard actually started out as this piece of paper. So I'll just move that out there. You'll be able to see in the background, you can see little bits of the original paper, which gives it a bit more interest. You could use just plain white paper if you wanted to. You could use cardboard. Something with a fairly overall pattern is good, and nothing too dramatic. So we'll start by choosing our paints. I've chosen yellow, which is already in my paper. Haven't got a lilac here, so I've chosen blue and 2 shades of green. I think I'll probably stick with this one. Pop the other green away. I use this as a palette. It is actually just a sheet of laminated paper, but it works quite well as a palette. So I'm going to put a blob of yellow paint at the side. It's very warm today, so I won't put the other 2 colours out yet. Now you can do this with a brush if you want to do it with a brush, or I do it with my fingers. But if you want to do it with a brush, you can do. A little bit of paint on your fingers and you just dab it randomly onto your paper. You don't have to be precise, you can just go little blobs, little circles, whatever you want. Don't forget to go do some that are going off the edges, and then you don't end up with a border of white or unpatterned paper. This is why you need a baby wipe. While I've got my fingers all painted, I'm going to spread that paint out a little bit so that when I come to do my mark making, it's already spread out. Don't waste paint, so we'll add those bits elsewhere. And then we do the same. Move that over a bit. With our blue. Spread it out to set off with. Because I'm using colours that mix, okay, if my yellow's still wet and I happen to get yellow and blue mixed together, it will just make green, which is my third colour. So when you first start doing this technique, try and go for colours that will mix okay and not make mud. So I wouldn't, the first time I was trying this, use say red and green together, because I would end up with some browns on my page. But because these two mix to make green, that's fine. So I've got two colours, and I can always go back and add some more. And again, I'm going to add some green here and there. Off the edges of the page as well. I need a bit more yellow, so we'll go back in with some more yellow in other places. That's a good start. I've now got just to dry this, so I'll do this as quickly as possible. Right. Now I put a little bit of gesso out earlier on, this is an old CD case, I use that as a palette as well. And I've got a credit card. This is gesso. I've just got a little bit of gesso onto my credit card, and I'm just going to sort of, and it is a little bit, I'll get areas with more gesso than others, but I'm just dragging the gesso over the page, so it adds areas of white on top of the paint. and it's very random, and there'll be some areas with a lot of gesso and some areas with hardly any. You can then also dip the edge of your card in and do straight lines if you want, randomly across your page, because this is another bit of mark making. And then go the other way through them. There we are. So you see that blurs your colours out quite a bit. They aren't as distinct an area. Again, we'll dry it. Just about dry, yes. And then we've still got our 3 colours here, which should hopefully still be wet. So I will go with, let's see, I think I'll go with yellow for our foam stamp. And it could be that you need to get a bit more paint on your palette. You see, I haven't got those perfectly covered, but that doesn't matter. And then I'm just going to go in and stamp. And I get imperfect impressions, but that's fine. It's just about mark making and layers. So I've got quite a few circles with that. And I'm now going to go with my mark making things. So you've got your paint, just pick it up and add some marks randomly. If you look, I'm tending to where I've got a yellow area, I'm adding a little bit of green. If I've got a little bit of an area that I think, that's a bit boring, add a mark to it. And you are going to go all over till you're quite happy with that one. I tend to clean my mark making materials in between just so they don't get too gunged up and too painty. I think I need some more marks, so I've got this roll. This is quite a definite big mark, so I'm not going to put quite as many, and I'm going to space them out, but I am also going off the edge as well, because don't forget, you don't want to forget about the edges of your paper. And that will do for my blue, I think. And this it'll look different each time you do it, because you'll make different marks in different places, and you'll sort of have a different mindset and think, oh, I want more circles, I want more of this colour. So every time you do this, even though it's the same paper, it will look different. If you want solid circles, which I don't particularly this time, you can use a wine cork. I'll do a yellow one just so you can see. Where shall we go? We'll go there. So that's a big yellow, and it's quite a solid mark, which sometimes I like, sometimes it's not really what I want. So I'll set that aside. You can use smaller things like this. I'm just going to dry this, and then I'll show you how to use an ink pad. you want some marks but you don't want to use paint, you can use an ink pad and just make sure your paint is dry, because if you go onto your paint with your mark making materials, pick a paint and put it on your ink pad, you'll ruin your ink pad. So make sure every time you lift it up that it hasn't got paint on it. So again, we're just randomly mark making. My paint is very dry, so I'm fine. Oh, sun's come out. And again, don't forget the edges of your paper. It's sometimes quite nice to group things. So if you've got a square you were doing, you could group your squares. There we are. So that's that. Now I think what I'm going to do, just put that paintbrush in water, I'm going to use this one, and I think I'm going to go into the blue. Right, so I've got my paint. It might be fairly dry, doesn't matter, you can just pick up whatever you've got. And we press our cardboard in. Yeah, it's a bit too dry, I'll have to add a little bit more paint to it. Ideally, normally I would have used all my paint up before I moved on to the next step, but that would have taken too long for the video, so I'll just do it this way. Right, so I'm going to pick up a bit of my paint on my cardboard and then just go randomly. And it makes a nice, it looks almost like chicken wire. You turn your page around, go somewhere else. There we are. So that's more marks. Again, we'll dry it. And if you want, you can use your mark making things in different colours. So I've got some leftover gesso I don't want to waste. So I'll pick that up with my cardboard and I'll go over again with white. If there's a little bit of blue left over, I'll get a combination, a paler blue. And I know you think, oh, it looks a mess. But once you've cut it up, it looks completely different. I'll try it again. Do this to see if anything's dry. Yeah. Now we've got a stamp, say a fairly random background stamp. This is a music one, which is quite nice. If you've got stamps, you can actually use those at the end to add more interest as well. If you haven't got stamps, you can leave it at this. So I'm just going to add little areas of stamped, but not a particular image. I'm just going randomly into bits where I think it needs a bit more interest. and it's not the full image I'm doing. I'm just maybe doing a corner or a little bit just to fill the boring bits in. I don't think you could really call this paper boring, it's very zingy. So there we are. So that just adds more interest again. You could do that with whatever colour you wanted. So we'll set that aside. So there we are. This is our finished masterboard. Looks very, very messy. Very messy indeed. But when you cut small areas of it, it does look interesting and nice. So you can see, as much as I've done different things in different colours, they are very similar. I've got a lot bolder circles here than I have there. Doesn't really matter, go with what you want to do. So I'm going to stop the video and then I'll create something using these. Right, so we've got our masterboards finished. They're all completely dry and I've cut sections of both of them. They're very, very similar. I'll just pop that there so you can see. I cut a strip from one, just ink the edges in black, and then used it to make this card. This is the strip of masterboard. I've actually, this is a panel of white card. I've inked the edges in black to tie in with the fact that there's black everywhere. Stuck the strip of paper across with the inked edges. These are 3 stamped flowers just on some white paper and some scrap paper that had colour on it to tie in with the colours, and then just put a little tape sentiment. So I think you'll agree that's rather nice. Nice and simple but nice. This one is just a tag I made just out of black card. I cut a circle out of the masterboard, just drew around a lid, I think it was this lid, on the back, cut it out, then I just placed my circle to one side, cut the excess off and used the excess at that side. So that is all one circle. I did again ink the edges in black, that's a stamp sentiment and then a tape sentiment. I think I'll possibly replace this with one that's got a little bit of colour. I have a punch that punches out the whole reinforcers, and I think I'll probably do it out of this so it matches at the top, or at least put a little bit of black doodling or something on it. So that's 2 ideas for using your masterboards. You can also cut flowers, die cut shapes out of your masterboard. You could do hexagons and have it as a background and then have a bold focal point. You can use them for all sorts. And even if you've just got waste paint that you're not going to use, you can start a masterboard on a piece of paper just to use your paint up and then continue with it later. You don't have to do it all in one go. So I hope that gives you some ideas, and I hope you like those projects.